I thought I knew who I was, until a simple DNA test destroyed everything I believed about my family, my marriage, and myself. Some secrets should stay buried. This is why I regret taking that test. I was 28 when this all started, living what I thought was the perfect life in suburban Denver. My husband Jake and I had been together for 6 years, married for 3, and we had just welcomed our beautiful daughter Emma into the world. She was 8 months old at the time, with these piercing blue eyes and the most adorable chubby cheeks you've ever seen. Jake and I met at a coffee shop near the University of Colorado. I was finishing my nursing degree, working double shifts at a local hospital, always exhausted but determined to build something meaningful. He was this charming guy who worked in tech sales, confident, funny, the kind of person who could make friends with anyone in 5 minutes. When he asked for my number, I almost said no. I'd been burned before, and honestly, I thought he was out of my league. But Jake was persistent in the sweetest way. He'd show up at the coffee shop every Tuesday and Thursday, right when my shift ended, just to walk me to my car. He never pressured me, never made me feel uncomfortable. After 3 weeks of this routine, I finally agreed to a proper date. Our first date lasted 14 hours. We went to dinner, then to a late movie, then spent hours talking in his car outside my apartment. We covered everything. Our childhoods, our dreams, our biggest fears. I told him about my complicated relationship with my family, how I'd always felt like the odd one out. He shared stories about his close-knit Italian family, how his parents had been married for 35 years and still acted like teenagers around each other. What drew me to Jake wasn't just his looks or his charm. It was how safe he made me feel. Growing up, my family was ... complicated. My parents divorced when I was 12, and both of them remarried within 2 years. I bounced between houses, never quite fitting in anywhere. My mom was always stressed, working 2 jobs to make ends meet. My dad started a whole new family with his second wife, and I felt like an afterthought whenever I visited. Jake's family was the opposite of everything I'd known. His parents, Maria and Tony, welcomed me immediately. Sunday dinners at their house became a tradition, with Jake's 3 brothers and their families all gathered around this massive dining room table. They argued loudly, laughed even louder, and made me feel like I belonged somewhere for the first time in my adult life. When Jake proposed, it was at one of those Sunday dinners, right after his mom served her famous tiramisu. He got down on one knee in front of everyone, his voice shaking as he said, "Sarah, you've made me the man I always wanted to be. Will you marry me?" I was crying so hard I could barely say yes. Our wedding was small but perfect. Both our families came together, and for once, I felt like I had the complete, loving family I'd always dreamed of. We bought a little house with a white picket fence. Literally, I know how that sounds. And started trying for a baby right away. Emma came into our lives like a little miracle. After 2 years of trying and 1 heartbreaking miscarriage, seeing her healthy face for the first time was the most overwhelming moment of joy I'd ever experienced. Jake cried harder than I did when the doctor placed her on my chest. Those first 8 months with Emma were magical, despite the sleep deprivation and constant worry that comes with being a new parent. Jake was an incredible father, patient, gentle, always eager to help with feedings and diaper changes. He'd spend hours just staring at Emma, telling her stories about his day at work or singing Italian lullabies his grandmother had taught him. We were that couple everyone else was slightly jealous of. We still went on date nights thanks to Jake's mom who loved babysitting. We supported each other's careers. I'd gone back to work part-time. Jake had gotten a promotion that meant better hours and more money. We talked about having another baby, maybe buying a bigger house. Looking back now, I realize how naive I was to think life could stay that perfect. I'd grown up in chaos and dysfunction, so when I finally found stability and love, I held on to it with both hands. I trusted completely, maybe too completely. I never questioned anything, because I didn't want to jinx what we had. But here's the thing about secrets. They have a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply you bury them. So when they do, they don't just hurt you. They obliterate everything you thought you knew about your life. The first crack in my perfect world came from the most innocent place imaginable. My mother-in-law's curiosity about genetics. Maria had always been fascinated by family history, tracing genealogies and collecting old photographs. She'd recently gotten really into those ancestry websites, The kind where you spit in a tube and learn about your heritage. Sarah, you should do one of these DNA tests, she said one Sunday, bouncing Emma on her knee. It would be so interesting to see what Emma's full genetic picture looks like. Jake's got all that Italian blood, but what about your side? I laughed it off. Oh, you know my family? We're probably just boring Irish and German mutts. But Maria's suggestion planted a seed. I'd always been curious about my ancestry, especially since my family tree was so scattered and complicated. That innocent conversation would turn out to be the beginning of the end of everything I thought I knew. The idea of taking a DNA test might have stayed just that, an idea. If it weren't for my sister-in-law, Lisa. Jake's middle brother Marco had married Lisa 3 years earlier, and she was one of those people who dove headfirst into every new trend. When Ancestry DNA kits went on sale for Black Friday, she bought them for the entire family as Christmas gifts. It'll be fun, she announced at Christmas dinner, handing out boxes wrapped in shiny paper. We can all compare results and see how genetically similar the brothers are. Plus, Sarah, you'll finally know what percentage Italian Emma is. Everyone seemed excited about it. Jake's brothers immediately started joking about who would have the most diverse heritage, and Maria was practically vibrating with anticipation. Even Jake seemed interested, though he made some crack about hoping he wasn't secretly adopted. I felt a weird knot in my stomach, but I couldn't explain why. Maybe it was just the general anxiety I'd been carrying since becoming a mother. That constant low-level worry that something terrible could happen at any moment. New parents know what I mean. You finally have this precious thing to lose, and suddenly the world feels dangerous in ways you never noticed before. We all did our tests together on New Year's Day, turning it into a silly family activity. Jake's whole family gathered in the living room, following the instructions and laughing as we spit into the little tubes. Emma was napping upstairs, and I remember thinking how nice it would be to have her genetic story to tell her someday. Okay, everyone seal them up and ship them out, Lisa announced, acting like the project manager of our family genetics investigation. Results should be back in 4 to 6 weeks. Those weeks passed normally. Jake went back to work after the holidays. I settled into my routine with Emma, and life continued as usual. I honestly forgot about the DNA test most days. When I did remember, I felt mildly curious about what it might reveal. But nothing more than that. The first sign something was off came from Jake himself, though I didn't recognize it at the time. About 3 weeks after we'd sent in our samples, he started acting different. Not dramatically different, just slightly off in ways that nagged at the back of my mind. He'd always been the type to check his email obsessively. Work emails, sports news, random notifications. But suddenly he was checking his phone with this intense focus I'd never seen before. When I'd ask what he was looking at, he'd quickly close whatever app he was using and say it was just work stuff. Then there were the conversations that stopped when I entered the room. I'd come downstairs after putting Emma down for a nap, and Jake would be on the phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. The moment he saw me, he'd wrap up the call quickly. Just work drama, he'd explain, but something in his voice sounded strained. The strangest thing was how he started talking about the DNA tests. At first, he'd seemed excited, making jokes about discovering he was part Viking or secretly related to some famous Italian. But as the weeks went on, he became dismissive, almost annoyed by the whole thing. I kind of regret doing those stupid tests, he said one evening while we were watching TV. It's probably all just marketing nonsense anyway. Those companies aren't even that accurate. I looked at him, confused. Since when do you care about accuracy? Last week you were hoping you'd find out you're descended from gladiators. He laughed, but it sounded forced. I just think some things are better left unknown, you know. What's the point of knowing you're 23% this or 47% that? Doesn't change who you are. This was such a complete reversal from his earlier attitude that I started paying more attention. Jake had always been an open book. One of the things I loved most about him was how transparent he was about everything. He'd tell me about work conflicts, family drama, even embarrassing childhood stories. This new, secretive version of my husband felt like a stranger. The breaking point came about 5 weeks after we'd sent in the tests. I was in the kitchen making dinner when Jake's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and his face went completely pale. I need to take this outside, he said, already heading for the back door. Through the window, I watched him pace back and forth on our patio. One hand pressed to his ear, the other running through his hair repeatedly. Something he only did when he was really stressed. The call lasted maybe 10 minutes, but it felt like an hour. When he came back inside, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Yeah, just ... work stuff. Big client drama." But his hands were shaking when he reached for his beer. That night, Jake was restless. He tossed and turned, got up twice to check on Emma, something he rarely did unless she was crying. And I caught him staring at the ceiling with this expression I had never seen before, like he was trying to solve an impossible puzzle. "Hey, Jake, what's going on?" I whispered around 2 a.m. "And don't say it's work. I know you better than that." He was quiet for so long I thought he'd fallen asleep. Finally, he said, "What if something came up in those DNA results that ... complicated things?" "What do you mean, complicated things?" Another long pause. "I don't know. I'm probably overthinking it. Let's just see what happens when the results come back." But I could hear it in his voice. He already knew something. Whatever those phone calls had been about, whatever was keeping him awake at night, it wasn't hypothetical. It was real, and it was coming for us. I just had no idea how completely it would destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m. I know the exact time because I was feeding Emma her morning bottle when my phone chimed with a notification from Ancestredna. "Your results are ready." My heart did this weird little skip, part excitement, part anxiety. After weeks of Jake's strange behavior and cryptic comments about the DNA tests, I'd been dreading this moment as much as anticipating it. Emma finished her bottle, and I put her in her bouncer, scrolling through my phone to find the app. But before I could open it, Jake appeared in the kitchen. Already dressed for work, even though he didn't usually leave for another hour. "Hey, did you get the email about the DNA results?" he asked, trying to sound casual but failing completely. "Yeah, just now. I was about to check." "Don't." The word came out sharp and urgent. He immediately softened his tone. "I mean, maybe we should look at them together tonight, make it a thing, you know? Okay, open a bottle of wine, make it fun." I stared at him. "Okay, it's just ancestry results. It's not like we're opening medical test results, I know. I think it would be more fun to do it together." He kissed my forehead quickly. "I've got to run to work early today. Big presentation. Let's look at them tonight." "Okay." Before I could respond, he was gone, leaving me standing in the kitchen with a squirmy baby and a phone full of unanswered questions. The day dragged by. I tried to focus on my usual routine, Emma's nap times, household chores, a grocery run. But I kept thinking about that email. More than that, I kept thinking about Jake's reaction. Why was he so nervous about ancestry results? What could possibly be in there that would require wine and emotional preparation? Around lunchtime, I called my best friend Melissa. "So Jake's acting super weird about these DNA test results." I told her while Emma played with her toys on the living room floor. "Weird how?" "Like he basically begged me not to open mine until he gets home tonight. He's been acting strange for weeks, ever since we sent the tests in. Phone calls he takes outside, checking his email obsessively, just not himself." Melissa was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, can I ask you something? Don't get mad, but I have to ask." "Okay. Do you think Jake might be worried the test will show something about Emma's paternity?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "What? No, why would you even—" I'm sorry. It's just, you know how those ancestry sites also show DNA matches with relatives? If Jake was worried about something like that, it might explain why he's being so secretive." "Melissa, that's insane. Jake has never cheated on me, ever, and Emma is definitely his daughter. She has his eyes, his smile, his stubborn streak." "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm probably watching too much daytime TV. It's just that his behavior sounds so suspicious." After we hung up, I couldn't shake what she'd said. I looked at Emma, really looked at her. She did have Jake's eyes, those bright blue eyes that had first attracted me to him. But now that I thought about it, lots of people have blue eyes. And her hair was lighter than both of ours, though the pediatrician had said baby hair often changes color. I shook my head, annoyed with myself for even entertaining such thoughts. Jake adored Emma. He'd been there for every doctor's appointment during my pregnancy. Held my hand during 14 hours of labor, cried when she took her first steps last month. The idea that he might doubt she was his daughter was absurd. But if not paternity concerns, what else could explain his behavior? By 4 p.m., I'd convinced myself I was overthinking everything. Jake had been stressed at work lately. Maybe the DNA test thing was just him being weird about privacy or something. I decided to respect his request and wait to open the results together. Jake came home at his usual time, carrying a bottle of my favorite wine and wearing an expression I could unquite read. Nervous but trying to appear excited. "Ready for our big genetic reveal?" he asked, but his smile looked forced. We settled on the couch after putting Emma to bed. Jake poured 2 glasses of wine, and I noticed his hands were slightly shaky. I opened the Ancestry app on my phone, feeling that familiar knot in my stomach. "Okay, here we go," I said, clicking on my results. The ethnicity breakdown appeared first: 52% Irish, 23% German, 18% English, 7% Scandinavian. It's pretty much what I'd expected based on what little I knew about my family history. "See? Boring Irish and German mutt, just like I predicted," I said, showing Jake the screen. He barely glanced at it. "Cool. Very cool. Your turn," I said, reaching for his phone. "Actually, maybe we should call it a night. Emma will probably wake up early tomorrow." And Jake, I set down my wine glass. "What is going on? You've been acting bizarre about this for weeks, and now you don't even want to look at your own results?" He stared at his phone for a long moment, then looked up at me with an expression that made my blood run cold. It was the look of someone who was about to break terrible news. "There's something I need to tell you before we look at these results. Something I should have told you a long time ago." My heart started pounding. "What are you talking about?" "The thing is," he took a shaky breath, "Emma might not be mine." The words hit me like a slap. "What did you just say?" "I'm so sorry. I should have told you when she was born, but she looked so much like me and I convinced myself it didn't matter. And what are you talking about?" I was on my feet now, the room spinning slightly. "Right around the time Emma was conceived, you and I had that huge fight. You went to stay with your sister for a few days, remember? I made a mistake. A terrible mistake." The rest of his confession came out in a rush of words that felt like they were coming from underwater. An ex-girlfriend. A night of drinking. A moment of weakness he'd regretted immediately. "But Emma is mine," he kept saying. "I know she's mine. The timing was wrong for it to be anyone else's, and she looks just like me, and—" "Stop." I held up my hand, feeling like I might vomit. "Just stop talking." I grabbed both our phones, my hands shaking so badly I could barely navigate to his DNA results. If Jake had cheated, if there was any possibility Emma wasn't his, these tests would show the truth. But as his results loaded, I realized I wasn't prepared for any version of the truth that was coming. I'll never forget the moment those results loaded on Jake's phone. We were sitting on our gray sectional couch, the one we picked out together.
Yeah.
During our first year of marriage, debating for hours over fabric swatches and cushion firmness, like it was the most important decision in the world. Emma's baby monitor was crackling softly from the coffee table, and I could hear her peaceful breathing through the static. The ethnicity results appeared first. 67% Italian, 18% Greek, 12% Spanish, 3% Northern African. Exactly what we'd expected from Jake's family history. For a split second, I felt relieved. Everything looked normal. Then I scrolled down to the DNA matches section, and my world exploded. At the top of the list, where it should have shown Emma as his daughter, there was nothing. No close family matches at all. But that wasn't the part that destroyed me. It was what came next. Closed DNA match, Sarah Mitchell Thompson wife, predicted relationship. Half-sister, 24.7% DNA shared. I read those words 3 times before they registered. Half-sister? The phone slipped from my hands and clattered onto the hardwood floor. "Sarah, what does it say?" Jake's voice sounded like it was coming from the end of a tunnel. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. And the room was spinning and I felt like I was falling even though I was sitting down. Half-sister. Jake was my half-sister. No, that was wrong. Jake was my half-brother. "Oh God," Jake whispered. He'd picked up the phone and was staring at the screen, his face completely white. "Oh my God, Sarah, this has to be wrong. This has to be a mistake." But even as he said it, pieces were clicking into place in my mind with horrifying clarity. Jake's father, Tony, had been a traveling salesman in his younger years. He'd told us stories about driving all over Colorado and Wyoming in the 1960s, selling kitchen equipment door to door. My mother had lived in Fort Collins then, working at a diner, young and single, and my mom, I whispered. Tony and my mom. Oh God, oh God, oh God. Jake was shaking his head frantically. No, Sarah, no. This is impossible. These tests are wrong sometimes. False positives, or contaminated samples, or Jake. My voice came out eerily calm. Your dad used to travel to Fort Collins for work in 1965. My mom lived in Fort Collins in 1965. She has never told me who my biological father was. Said she didn't want to complicate my life with that information. The mathematics of genetics and conception dates were spinning through my head like a calculator from hell. I was born in March 1966. Tony would have been in Fort Collins in June 1965. My mother, young and working at a truck stop diner, meeting this charming Italian salesman. We need to call them, I said, standing up on shaky legs. We need to call your parents. We need to call my mom. Right now, Sarah. Wait, right now, Jake. I was screaming, but I couldn't stop myself. We've been married for 3 years. We have a baby together. We need to know if we're... I couldn't even say the words. Jake was crying now, tears streaming down his face. This isn't happening. This can't be happening. I grabbed my phone and called my mother. It was almost 10 p.m., but I didn't care. Sarah, honey, what's wrong? Mom's sleepy voice answered after 4 rings. Mom, I need you to tell me about my biological father right now. No more protecting me from complicated information. I need to know. Silence. Then, Sarah, what's brought this on? Mom, I was sobbing now, barely able to get the words out. Did you know a man named Tony Rossini in 1965? Italian guy, kitchen equipment salesman? The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When my mother finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Oh, sweetheart, oh no. How did you find out? The confirmation hit me like a physical blow. I doubled over, retching while Jake sat frozen on the couch, staring at his phone like it might spontaneously change the results, if he looked at it hard enough. I can explain, my mom was saying through the phone. I was so young and he was married, and I never imagined you'd ever meet his family. When you started dating Jake, the name was different. His last name is different from Tony S., and I thought it was just a coincidence. ... quotes, UKNEW. I screamed into the phone. You knew and you let me marry him. You let me have his baby. I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know Jake was Tony's son until your wedding. And by then you were so happy, and I thought maybe I was wrong. And I hung up on her and immediately called Tony and Maria's house. Jake tried to stop me, grabbing for my phone, but I was beyond reasoning. Maria answered, cheerful and warm as always. Sarah, sweetheart, how are you and the baby? Maria, I need to speak to Tony, right now. It's about the DNA tests. I heard her call for him, heard the phone being passed over. Tony's voice came on, cautious now. Sarah, is everything all right? Tony, did you have an affair with a woman named Linda Mitchell in Fort Collins in 1965? The silence told me everything I needed to know. Sarah, ... Tony's voice was broken, devastated. Oh, my dear girl, I never knew. I swear to you, I never knew she was pregnant. She never told me. The phone slipped from my hands again. Jake and I stared at each other across our living room. The room where we'd brought Emma home from the hospital, where we'd celebrated her first. Christmas, where we'd made love countless times, where we'd built our entire life together. We were siblings. We had been siblings the entire time. Our daughter, our beautiful, innocent daughter, sleeping upstairs, was the product of an accidental, incestuous relationship. And everyone in our families had suspected, at least partially, and no one had stopped us. The hours after that phone call were a blur of horror, rage, and disbelief. Jake and I sat in our living room until nearly 3 a.m., alternating between crying, shouting, and sitting in stunned silence. We kept grabbing our phones to reread the DNA results, as if the words might change if we looked at them enough times. This is insane, Jake kept saying, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. This is absolutely insane. How does something like this happen? But deep down, we both knew how it happened. My mother, young and lonely, working at a truck stop diner in Fort Collins. Tony, married but traveling alone for weeks at a time, charming and handsome, and probably talking about his dreams of starting a family. One night, maybe several nights, of connection that neither of them thought would ever matter again. The cruel irony was that Jake and I had fallen in love for many of the same reasons my mother had been attracted to Tony. The charm, the warmth, the way both Tony and Jake could make anyone feel like the most important person in the room. We'd inherited the same magnetic personalities that had drawn our parents together 30 years earlier. At dawn, Jake's parents showed up at our door. I heard Tony Eski in the lock. We'd given his parents keys. After Emma was born. And then Maria's voice calling out softly, "Sarah, Jake, we're here." They looked like they'd aged 10 years overnight. Maria had obviously been crying, her usually perfect hair disheveled and her eyes red-rimmed. Tony looked broken, his shoulders slumped in a way I'd never seen before. "Where's Emma?" was the first thing Maria asked. "Still sleeping," I managed to say. My voice was hoarse from crying. We sat around our kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared dozens of Sunday dinners, where Maria had taught me to make her famous marinara sauce, where Tony had helped Jake fix a wobbly leg just last month. Now it felt like we were sitting in a courtroom waiting for someone to deliver a verdict that would change everything. Tony spoke first. "I need you both to know that I never, ever knew Linda was pregnant. If I had known, I would have. I don't know what I would have done, but I never would have let you to get together if I'd known the truth. But you knew something," I said, my voice sharper than I intended, "at our wedding. Mom said she figured it out at our wedding. Did you recognize her?" Tony's hands were shaking as he rubbed his face. I thought she looked familiar, but it had been so long and people change. It wasn't until she mentioned Fort Collins during the reception that I started to wonder. "But by then, you were married. You were happy." I convinced myself I was imagining things. "You convinced yourself," Jake exploded. "Dad, we're siblings. You should have said something the moment you suspected. And broken up your marriage based on a 30-year-old suspicion?" Maria interjected, her voice fierce. "You were so happy together. You were happy together, we thought. We hoped we were wrong. That's when I lost it completely." I stood up so fast my chair fell backward, clattering on the kitchen floor. "Happy? You think this is about happiness? You have a child together? Emma is your granddaughter and your great-niece. Do you understand what we've done? Do you understand what this means for her?" The room went silent, except for the sound of Emma stirring upstairs through the baby monitor. As if on cue, she started crying, that demanding wail that meant she was hungry and wanted attention. "I'll get her," Jake said automatically, but I grabbed his arm. "No, I need... I can't look at her right now knowing..." I couldn't finish the sentence. Maria stood up. "I'll go to her." While Maria went upstairs, the three of us remaining sat in horrible silence. I kept staring at Jake and Tony, looking for resemblances I'd never noticed before. They both had the same nose, the same way of running their hands through their hair when stressed. How had I never seen it? How had no one ever commented on how much Jake looked like his father? And by extension, how much he looked like me? When Maria came back downstairs with Emma, my heart shattered all over again. Emma was babbling happily, reaching for Jake with those bright blue eyes. She'd inherited from both her parents because we were genetically similar enough to have the same eye color. "What do we do now?" Jake asked quietly, taking Emma and holding her close. "How do we fix this?" "You can't fix this," I said. "This isn't something you fix. This is something you live with." Over the next few days, the confrontations continued. My mother drove down from Fort Collins, and we had the most brutal conversation of our lives. She kept apologizing, kept saying she never meant for any of this to happen, but her apologies felt hollow. She'd had 30 years to tell me the truth about my paternity. She'd watched me fall in love with Jake, get engaged, get married, have his baby, and she'd said nothing. "I was protecting you," she kept saying. "I was protecting all of us." From what? From the truth. From making informed decisions about our lives. "From exactly this," she said, gesturing at the wreckage of my kitchen, where I'd thrown a coffee mug at the wall earlier. From this pain and chaos and destruction. The worst part was telling Jake's brothers. Marco and Lisa came over the next evening, and we had to sit them down and explain that their nephew was also their cousin, that their sister-in-law was actually their half-sister, that their entire family tree had been redrawn overnight. Lisa, who'd bought us all those DNA kits as gifts, kept apologizing until I wanted to scream. I never thought, I just thought it would be fun. It's not your fault, Jake told her, but I wasn't ready to be that generous. If Lisa hadn't bought those damn kits, we might have lived our entire lives never knowing. Would that have been better? No. Would ignorance have been kinder than this devastating truth? The hardest part was that nothing had actually changed except our knowledge. Jake was still the same man I'd fallen in love with. Emma was still the same perfect baby we both adored. Our house was still filled with the same memories, the same inside jokes, the same comfortable routines. But everything was different. Every kiss felt wrong. Every time Jake touched me, I thought about genetics and shared DNA and taboos I'd never imagined applying to my life. When I looked at Emma, instead of seeing our love made manifest, I saw the evidence of something that shouldn't have happened. We were still married. We were still parents. But we were also siblings, and there was no path forward that didn't involve destroying everything we'd built together. 2 years have passed since that devastating Tuesday morning when our DNA results arrived. As I sit here in my new apartment across town watching Emma, now 2.5, play with her toy kitchen. I'm still processing everything that's happened since. The immediate aftermath was a nightmare none of us were prepared for. Jake and I tried to stay together at first. We went to counseling, both individual and couples therapy, desperately searching for a way to make this work. Dr. Peterson, our therapist, had dealt with difficult situations before, but she admitted this was outside her normal experience. The love you feel for each other is real, she told us during one particularly difficult session. The family you've built is real. The question you need to answer is whether you can separate the biological reality from the emotional reality. For a while, we thought maybe we could. We slept in separate bedrooms, but tried to maintain our family unit for Emma's sake. We told ourselves that genetics didn't define us, that plenty of cultures throughout history had different taboos, that our love transcended biological relationships. But the strain was unbearable. Every time Jake tried to kiss me, my whole body would tense up. When we held hands, all I could think about was the DNA test results. The physical intimacy that had been such a natural, beautiful part of our relationship became impossible. We were trying to maintain a marriage without any of the things that make a marriage work. The breaking point came about 6 months later. Jake's extended family was gathering for Tony's 70th birthday, and we had to decide whether to attend together. The thought of sitting at that familiar dinner table, pretending everything was normal, while knowing the truth about our relationship, felt unbearable. I can't do this anymore, I told Jake the night before the party. I can't pretend we're just a normal married couple when we're not. Jake broke down crying. But we are normal, Sarah. We're the same people we were before we knew. Nothing about us has actually changed. Everything has changed, I said. Maybe not who we are, but how I feel about who we are. I look at you and I see my brother, and I can't unsee that now. We separated that month. Jake stayed in our house. The house his father had helped us buy. The house where his mother had taught me to cook. The house that represented everything beautiful about the family we'd accidentally joined before we knew we were already family. I moved into a small apartment with Emma. Joint custody felt impossible to explain to a toddler. So we decided Jake would see her regularly, but I would be her primary caregiver. The story we told friends and family was simpler. We'd grown apart, discovered we wanted different.